Well, hello everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Accession Everything Service Management podcast. I'm Daniel Gilby, joined as always by my co-host Sunil.
Hello.
And today we've got a really great guest. We've got Kevin Adams from the Donkey Sanctuary joining us to talk to us about some of the initiatives and things happening there. Kevin, great to have you with us. Be great if you could also just give a quick introduction to our listeners, and then we'll get on with the conversation if that's okay.
Yeah, that's fine, Daniel. Thank you. Yes, Kevin Adams, the Executive Director of Resources at the Donkey Sanctuary. And for those that don't know us, we're a UK-based animal welfare charity headquartered out of Sidmouth in Devon, but we operate in 35 countries around the world with partner agencies, improving the lives of donkeys and people who interact with donkeys around the globe.
Fantastic. Thanks, Kevin. Great to have you with us.
Okay. Is that my cue, Dan?
Is that the awkward pause piece? We'll get that out of the way first of all. So I know you had a really fantastic kind of initial question, and I think a lot of our listeners will be very interested in this as well. So why don't you say it, Sunil?
Thank you, and Kevin, great to have you with us, as Dan said. So I think what we wanted to do is just because there's lots of sort of transformational type initiatives we're going to talk about today, but you know, many of our listeners, and in fact, Dan and I, before we started talking to you, may really not immediately connect technology, digital capability, and digital change with an animal welfare organization. So maybe just set the scene, if you don't mind. Just explain how these two things, you know, interrelate.
No, it's a fantastic question and one that I've been asked before. What the hell's tech got to do with donkeys, right? If I were to describe the fact that we have a donkey herd down in Devon, we've got 4,500 of them, and we've been collecting veterinary data on them for 10 plus years. You start to realize that actually all of that data has to be stored, managed, and be available for research purposes. But as I mentioned in the introduction, you know, we operate in multiple countries. We've got staff in Mexico, Ethiopia, Kenya, Spain, Italy. So those people need to be paid. We need to comply with regulations in those countries. And for the 600 staff that operate within Devon, a lot of them are not direct donkey facing. So technology is pretty much at the heart of what we do. And to ensure that we continue to provide good value for money and for our donors to recognize that as much of their money goes to the direct donkey cause, we try to make that as efficient as possible. And that's where technology plays its part, whether or not that's video conferencing, such as this, or starting to take advantage of the emergence of AI and how can that actually help us. So it's all about efficiency, it's all about visibility, it's all around data, which I think people would resonate with in their own organizations as well.
Yeah, no, and that makes absolute sense. And you know, as you describe it that way, it becomes increasingly clear. But it's a great segue actually into perhaps one of the big challenges of your role, which is how do you balance, you know, what is clearly a requirement for investment in technology, and you know, we've been speaking to you for a while now, so we know that there has been some drive to technology change. How do you balance that with what is the core of the organization, right, which is the welfare of the donkeys that you know that you look after, or that you may end up looking after?
And again, it's a really good question that I've been asked before, and there's never a right answer for it, because it is a balance and it depends where you are on your maturity as an organization. It depends on the organization itself. How do we operate? But what becomes more and more apparent, and certainly did post-pandemic, was actually the years of where people came into the office suddenly changed. We have a significant hybrid workforce that allows us to attract talent on those non-donkey facing roles, attract talent from outside the Devon and Sidmouth area. I'm not saying there isn't the talent there, but we're all fishing in the same pond. But also donors really want to know where their money is being spent, and it's being spent wisely. And if you've got an overly inflated back office function that is dragging down the organization, it means there's less money for that front end activity that, we're here to do. So technology is not just simply about efficiency, it's about making sure that we can evidence what we're doing and are we doing it on the right things. Mission focused organizations such as ours, you would assume that everybody knows what the right thing to do, but the right thing is actually dependent on where you sit in the organization. So for us, the ability to now monitor, monetize in some degree as well, the work that we're undertaking through capturing data, how long does it take us to do things, allows us to really focus down again on that, getting that balance right. Do we need to do some of those activities in the way that we currently do them? Do we need to re-engineer them to make them more efficient? Can we use technology to eliminate them? All of that is coming into the mix, because as anyone watching this podcast will probably resonate with, the economy is struggling, not just simply the economy. The economics of managing a charity is very difficult. We're essentially a large farm, our sanctuary model in particular. So we are being pressurized in the same way that agriculture is here in the UK, and not just here in the UK, but globally. So we've got the three big inputs of fuel, fertilizer, and feed. All of them have undergone increasing amounts of pressure from inflation. So that means we've got to look at how can we make our operations much more streamlined, and technology is pretty much at the heart of everything that is going to enable us to continue to do all the great work that we do, but actually make us more streamlined so that more of our donors' money go directly to that donkey care that we're here to deliver.
Dan, just before I know you have the next question, but Kevin said something there that's quite interesting to perhaps talk about. So how many countries, Kevin, did you say you work in?
We operate in 36 countries. We do it, and we do it through partner agencies as well. So we've got bases in Ethiopia, Kenya, but we operate in multiple countries that we don't hold a base in through partner agencies.
So when you talk about those three inputs, fuel, fertilizer, feed, I think you said, didn't you? And you talk about things like veterinary care, etc. I mean, you're managing that multiple economies, different prices, different potentially regulatory environments, some that may be, more enforceable than others, all of that kind of stuff. How do you manage that then?
Well, so things to bear in mind. So whilst we operate in multiple jurisdictions around the world, our sanctuary model is particularly a Northern Hemisphere facet of our operations. So we have sanctuaries in Italy, Spain, Ireland, and in the UK. Our other operations are about improving the welfare of donkeys, typically in the global south, where basic animal welfare, education, knowledge, access to services is more about what we do in the global south rather than the traditional sanctuary model. So when I talk about operating, we've got two operating models. We've got one which is essentially a sanctuary model, big farms, and the other is about influence, education, knowledge, and working within community structures to improve their access to veterinary services, welfare services for those animals. So two very, very different models, but both under pressure. A sanctuary model is dictated a lot by that, the three F's, inflation. The others are more geopolitical events, what's actually happening on the ground, as well as environmental impact, as we see the impact of global warming.
Yeah, absolutely.
So safe to say a lot of moving parts there, right? And as you've called out, a couple of operating models to consider, which will have that kind of overlap as well. So just to sort of kind of tick things along, I suppose we've been talking for a little while now. There's this apparent and certain need there around digital transformation. Given you're working in the non-profit charitable sector, time's constrained, money's constrained. There's focus on a lot of these areas. You've just talked about some of the economic pressures there. How are you kind of well, again, it's about the balance, but when it comes to the sort of strategic decision making that sits around driving that change, talk us through some of the kind of challenges you see there, and maybe some strategies again that you're sort of undertaking to overtake that you're utilizing to kind of work through that.
Yeah, I think it's fair to say mission-led organizations typically have a very strong cultural base, and ours has been based around our founder. A lot of what we did do was dictated by that individual and the people that she gathered around her, and very successful in that in its own guise. What we are moving towards is a much more transparent, data-led organization. Traditionally, a lot of the data had been hidden in silos. Not all of it was accessible. So surfacing that information, often for the very first time, has been quite an eye-opener for the executive team, and then subsequently our trustee body as well. That's a direction of travel that we will continue to pursue. And again, that's why technology, the availability, the accessibility of data, the provenance of being able to identify its source, its relevance to us in terms of helping us make good decisions, is becoming more paramount as we start to challenge into some of the bigger challenges that we have around how do we continue both our sanctuary model and continue to develop our overseas model. It's a new place for us, and I think having worked in the charity sector now since about 2015, a lot of charities, a lot of non-for-profit organizations really struggle to surface the data that helps them make really good informed decisions. That's not to say the decisions that we made up to now weren't good, but I think what we are seeing is the ever need for more and more data, appropriate data, rather than being overwhelmed by it as well. So again, that's where the digital transformation is coming to rub against both culture and the people who operate within the organization.
And from that sort of cultural perspective, because I'm certain that there's a number, if not all, of the team there are highly passionate about what they do, the mission itself. How are you kind of, not you specifically, but how is that kind of navigation around sort of saying, well, we need to do this transformation, and then there's going to be, I'm going to argue as well, that potentially people, well, we've always done it like this, why do we need to change? There's often that resistance. How are you kind of, I guess, mitigating or circumventing that? What have you found is a great approach to overcome that?
So you're absolutely right. It's fair to say, and again, why I mentioned the sort of the culture led by a single founder, came from nothing to being a global presence charity as we are today. So it did amazing work, but growth has now come with its own individual challenges. Growing at speed without the assurance perhaps that we would like in some of our jurisdictions. Questions now being raised about the efficacy of the work. Is it the most efficient way of delivering some of the services that we want to deliver? I think we've got enough evidence to help people understand that what went before was fine. It was the heritage that drove us to where we are today. But more importantly, the way that we did it previously is not going to provide us with sustained growth with assurance in 10 years' time. So we need to lay the foundations of that now. A lot of conversations, a lot of disagreements, a lot of transparency as to why we need to deliver our services in a slightly different way. And also, I think it's some of this is a matter of timing. Technology, everyone's got a phone in their pocket. We're all users of technology in a slightly different way. Taking advantage of them in your workplace is no longer a new thing. You don't create this divide between work and home because your phone's always with you. So the acceptance of technology in particular has become far more prevalent at the donkey sanctuary. It's a lot easier to talk about it. We introduced some tablets to grooms to collect donkey data, saved them a huge amount of paperwork, which meant they could spend some time with their beloved donkeys. Well, it's a win-win for people as well. So we've had some really good use cases where we've really helped people along that journey, and other cases where it hasn't landed so well. I think what we've done is also learned from that and readjusted and adapted our engagement styles and approaches as we evolve as an organization as well.
Can you give us any? I mean, the tablets is a great example, but perhaps maybe talk us through one or two of the other some of the sort of technological change that you've driven, Kevin. I think because that's it's the journey that's really interesting, isn't it? From a sort of transformational perspective, a digitalization, if I can say it correctly, perspective.
Yeah, no, and it's been a journey, and it's still, and we're still not out of the journey. So that's
still on it.
Yeah, we're still on it, and we will be for some time. I think so. When I joined the organization, I did a strategic review, as a lot of new people do, and said, okay, we could do better here. We're doing really well in this area. But what was lacking was a long-term, where are we going and what are the components of actually getting there? Not surprisingly, it takes a number of years, depending on where you are in your digital maturity. And I did a digital maturity assessment against a number of dimensions, and the NCVO actually have a tool available for people that may want to use and use that in their own organizations. So we set the direction of travel through a strategic document, working out how much we thought it would take, but also what would we get at the end of it. One of the biggest things that became apparent very, very early on is that the charity was very reliant on email. So we were commissioning work between departments through email. So going back to that, as a donor to the Donkey Sanctuary, how do you ensure that most of that money gets to the front end services? Well, we weren't counting what was going in and what was going out and what the impact of that was on the organization. So I started to digitize how we would go about doing that for most of our functions. I think McKinsey said in about 1957, if you can't measure it, you can't manage it. And that was us. We had a lot of email going around, a lot of chat going around. So we moved to a service management model to count things that were necessary in our organization so that we could monitor and manage that workflow. We could then develop SLAs, so we can then start to benchmark ourselves against other charities. And very, very soon, we started to see a picture of what was actually being created in the organization. Quite honestly, some of it was a little bit surprising. The amount of advice that was being asked for because people couldn't find information meant that we were tying up critical resources on very, very simple bits of information. And again, going back to that data, we were then able to say, well, if we did this, we could stop this amount of activity. And activity is time, and time is money. And that's our donors' money. So it's a bit of a circular conversation with the charity. But when you go through that process, and then you're able to evidence that, as we did with my IT help desk, but you can reduce 90% of your advice tickets by putting most of the information on your internal intranet. Every one of those tickets used to cost me X amount of pounds. Now, those X amount of pounds are being delivered back to direct donkey care. That's when technology has a direct link to mission and how are we able to do more in the mission rather than spending it in the back office. So that's just a couple of examples really of how we've been through that journey. Vision, how to get there, fully costed. Have we veered off it? Of course we have. AI came in, and got distracted by what we're going to do in that space. But hey, that's fine. But the trajectory in terms of where we're going has been pretty consistent, and we'll review it at the end of this year to see if it's still appropriate for us as a charity. And if it is, we'll carry on, and if it's not, we'll adjust and flex accordingly.
I think, I mean, it's what you've described. I mean, at Accession, we deal with some very mature organizations who have been, honing their service management practice for years and years. But it's quite remarkable how many organizations we deal with whom are just starting in exactly the same way that you've described. A huge amount of email, lots of institutional siloed knowledge, no platform for knowledge sharing, no ability to, as I have said, measure and therefore manage. So in fact, the circumstances of your organization can be sort of abstracted, can't they, from the organizational challenge that you've just described.
Absolutely.
Email is the worst channel, right?
It's a channel, and I think that's it's not bad, it's not good as long as it's used appropriately. And interestingly, Sunil, this, I can honestly say I've been doing this type of thing for a very, very long time, and I've worked in different sectors from travel and leisure. You think I'm going into a sophisticated organization sometimes that on the face of it, you go, they're on the button with some of this. And then you realize when you get inside, it's all a bit of a facade. And actually the very basics are not there. And then you go, oh, okay, well, let's put some basics in. And they are. I think they are foundational to ensure that organizations can really represent themselves as efficient. And whether or not you're a shareholder or you're a founder or whether or not you're a donator of a service, you want to know that your investment, whether or not that's your own money or somebody else's money, is being spent wisely. And one of our values is actually spending money wisely. And that's where we come full circle in terms of helping drive some of that cultural change that says this is a way that we're actually been able to evidence that we're spending your money wisely, Mr. Donor, Mr. Foundation, Mr. Grant Maker, because quite frankly, we had a little way to go to be able to evidence that. We're still on the journey. We've still got lots to do.
And I can imagine if you're able to demonstrate these efficiencies in a much more structured format as well, when you're seeking grants, donations, and the like, there's going to be an uplift in the confidence of giving those or making them available to you. I don't know what the perhaps a 100% appropriate term would be. So you've got a potential compounded impact there as well, because there's
100%.
People are donating their money wisely, so because they know that you're spending it wisely, right?
Absolutely. And if you ever watch the Red Nose, they lead with how much of your donation goes directly to the causes. That is actually one of the biggest things that wins for them every single time, and it's good because they are a very lean organization. They rely very much on a different structure to us. They don't have inherent costs that that our model is, but that's our model, and we're happy with the model. We just need to make sure that we can deliver more to the cause, and that means that we need to look internally about how do we deliver those services that keep organizations going, but not starters, leavers, movers, payroll queries. We're a business within a business, but being able to do it efficiently fundamentally means that more of our money goes directly to our cause. It's a virtuous circle. Yes, it does help with foundational grants and donations and other forms of income as well.
So when given this service management transformation as well as the wider kind of organizational transformation you've talked a bit about, Kevin, what is it then? So just to bring it back to sort of service management more specifically, perhaps, What is your approach when you come to sort of evaluate the tooling that's out there in the market? Because we at Accession, we talk about a lot. There's a lot of choice out there. There's a lot of solutions. How are you kind of looking to analyze the market space and sort of determine what's going to be the most appropriate, what's going to be the best way to spend your money wisely as part of this transformation exercise?
So part of my role includes procurement. So my procurement team, they work directly into me. We typically go through a standard tendering process for service management capabilities. We're not ready to do that yet. When I joined, inherited a service management capability that I wanted to test against the organization in its basic format. Let's get people off email or bits of paper to something that we can count in, count out, put an SLA around, make sure. And we've been able to do that for the vast majority of activities. If I were to give you a percentage, probably about 80% now are moving through some form of service management capability from about 12%. So we've made a massive leap forward in areas that people never thought was appropriate for it. So we've got that very basic concept out there, but it doesn't do everything that we want it to do. And we will be going to market next year to understand what the market is offering in terms of enhanced service management capability. A lot of what we got is, as I say, is very basic, but if we, and I made this assessment very, very late actually, because I'm thinking about moving to something else rather sooner. The big cultural shift is moving them onto something that is actually not email. And the easiest way of doing that was to do something that they were already familiar with. Bringing something else in was just going to create some cultural chaos, is a phrase I used. And actually, what we decided to do was small steps. So next year, we know now that baseline, we've got all of the departments, or we certainly will do by the end of 2025. We'll have all of the departments on a service management platform. But it's very, very basic. It is service management 101. What the organization is saying to us, we actually want, now we've got familiar with this as a concept, and actually we can see it working, the reports are helping us make better decisions. We will go into a tender process where we would want to see some more sophistication. So,
sorry, Dan. No, I was just going to comment that it's very interesting that you've had that kind of 12% adoption rate, let's call it that. Now there's an 80%. And I think from my experience, what you'll find is that the teams and the people who are involved in utilizing that will then start to recognize the capability, embrace it, and then start coming to you saying, wouldn't it be great if we could do this as well? Wouldn't it be great if we could do that?
It sounds like you've been already speaking to some of my users, right? Especially those who've been using it for a little bit longer, yeah.
And then, that sort of snowballs in and will absolutely help inform on your decisions going forwards for, let's say, a more capable or more rounded or more robust solution set, which will answer those questions and provide that capability. And then, the idea is that just rolls on and on and on. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And the journey that we're on talks about bringing the organization at the speed that's right for them. And that's a hard call, I think. Certainly my experience of working in different organizations, and I've worked in quite a few, some really, really want to embrace the change. Others are resistant to it. We were at the bottom end of that scale, where actually we don't like change. We're quite happy with what we've got. We've operated this way for 57 years. Do you know what? Leave us alone. The rollout has been quite dramatic, and we've had to make some difficult decisions and had some difficult conversations with people. But the evidence now is to say, absolutely, as you've just described, Dan, we have now got people in those departments coming to us say, we really like this, but it doesn't do this. No, it's not. It's not ever going to do that because it's not part of its core capability, and actually, there's no development roadmap to deliver it. Well, note that down, because all of a sudden, like everything, you get to a point where you become familiar with it, and then you go, what if, what if, what if? And interestingly, one of our other values is to be inquisitive, and they are, and they are now challenging us to say, okay, so we got this, we really like it, thank you very much, but what's next?
Mm. And that helps with the cultural buy-in, right, as well. So great. Oh, that's great to hear.
Well, and it sounds like you've got a great opportunity here for automation, right? Because you have consolidated now data and workflow into a smaller subset of tools. You're removing some of the silos, and then actually you can start to drive excuse me, both productivity and efficiencies, right, by taking a lot of the manual stuff out of the system, the processes as they are.
100%. And I can't tell you the amount of times that managers said, you know what, it's great just to have it do a dashboard of what I've had in, what I've had out, what's beyond SLA. And that used to take us hours, a couple of hours a week to produce it from a spreadsheet. You don't need to do that anymore. You focus on the things that you need to focus in, not on the production of something that then subsequently you can make a decision on. I keep coming back to some of that phrases. It's a win-win, and what we're seeing is lots of people starting to adopt it, in the sense that it's going to make their lives easier, and that's the win-win. It makes their lives easier. It costs less. That cost can go back to what we're here for, which is the mission that I'm actually that we're here to deliver.
Really good. I mean, really insightful. And again, it just goes to show that service management touches across all verticals and every kind of use case there to support that. So thank you very much, Kevin, for sharing your insights. So I don't know if you've got anything kind of further to.
I've just got one more question, right? Which is not so much about the sort of the digital journey, but more about the journey, the forward, view for the Donkey Sanctuary. I mean, what are the sort of the next steps in that mission?
So the big focus for this year is I talked about our international operations and consolidating our financial platform so that we operate as one charity. We have multiple subsidiaries of that, but actually we're all one big charity. So consolidating that down, that's a big ask for us this year. Subsequently, the year after, we'll be looking at enhancing our service management capability and our human capital. And that's too far away then, because that'll take us up to about 2028. And who knows where artificial intelligence will take us. Maybe there won't be a need for me, which would be wonderful. I can retire eventually.
There's a field out there somewhere for you, Kevin, isn't there?
Yeah. I'm sure there is. I'm sure.
Brilliant. All right. Well, thank you again, Kevin. Really great to have you join us today. Thank you to those listening. If you'd like to find out more about the great work that Kevin and his team are doing at the Donkey Sanctuary, check out the website, swing on by, and by all means, put a donation in for that to support them and the team. Kevin, any kind of last thoughts from yourself?
No, I was going to say absolutely thank you. It's been an absolute pleasure. As you said, we have been talking, and I'm absolutely delighted to spend the afternoon with you today. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Kevin.